Good morning. How is everyone doing today? Good? Well, thank you all so much for coming. This is a session that Dr. Moretti is going to talk to you about today. It's about the Steubenville rape case, and he's going to talk about how social media played an effect in the case. My name's Tiffany Brandon, and I'm a freshman here at RMU. So I'm involved in the Century Media. I write for the school newspaper. I deal with the news section, so I write news stories, and I'm also a photographer for the Century. So if you guys have any questions after the session, if you're curious about news writing or photography, don't be afraid to talk to me about it, and I'd be welcome to talk to you.
Hi everyone, thank you for your patience. As many of you who are familiar with working with things, especially TV and technology, know that sometimes we have technical difficulties, so thank you for that. My name is Leah Fleischel. I am the news editor for the Century and RMU Century Media. I'm also involved with Colonial Sports Center and the Academic Media Center, doing behind-the-scenes stuff as well as being on-air talent, and I do RMU Live Sports, which is also super fun. So if you have any questions about pretty much anything involving RMU Century Media, feel free to come talk to me at lunch or at any time throughout the day. I'm going to introduce Dr. Anthony Moretti. He's an associate professor in the School of Communications here at RMU. Prior to joining the faculty here, he taught at Point Park University and Texas Tech University. He's also spent about 12 years in the broadcast industry before entering higher education. And just a little fun fact, we really like to call him affectionately Dr. Cheeseball because sometimes he tells cheesy jokes. Maybe he'll give you an example of that later. Sometimes, all the time. Anyway, without further ado, Dr. Moretti.
Yes, there's a wonderful story about a holiday party trying to find something for my mother-in-law and a cheese ball, and maybe I'll tell you at lunch, which I think is how that whole story got started. As you can tell, this is going to be a Skype-driven session. Joining us for this hour via Skype are two women who were intensely interested in the recent Steubenville rape case, in which I think all of you know at this point, two high school football players were convicted of raping a 16-year-old girl during a party last August. Our two guests, as you can see on Skype, and we're hoping Skype's going to cooperate with us this morning. On the right side there is Alexandria Goddard, and she has a 20-year career as a legal assistant with experience in fraud analysis and risk management, as well as being a former volunteer for court-appointed special advocate for the juvenile court system. She currently is a business owner who provides social media profile analysis to parents, as well as offering training seminars to parents and educators, which will enable them to monitor their child's social media use. And obviously on Twitter and on Facebook, quite frankly, is where I met her and got to learn of her interest in the case. And then slightly closer to me, and I'm going to get their pictures back up there in a second, is Rosemary Pennington. Rosemary is a doctoral candidate at the School of Journalism at Indiana University, where she also earned her master's. Since May 2008, she served as the project coordinator of the Voices and Visions of Islam and Muslims in a Global Perspective. She received her bachelor's from Ohio University and spent several years in the news radio industry before moving on into higher education. And as the current students know, I call them my kids. And when I was getting my PhD at OU, that's where Rosemary was as well. So I can still affectionately call her one of my kids, even though she's got one of her own these days. Our session is going to begin with our two guests sharing their thoughts on how social media turned what was an otherwise small-town legal case into a national conversation, and we're certainly going to be leaving plenty of time at the end for you to ask questions. Much like we did in the last hour, we'll just ask you to state your full name, the school you're from, and then the question that you have. So let me begin, and Rosemary, I'll start with you just simply because you're closer to me there on the screen. Okay. Minus social media, would there have been a national conversation about what happened in Steubenville, Ohio?
Well, I don't. So for reasons. First of all, if it hadn't been for social media, it's likely that this case would never have been tried, would never have seen the light of day. And then two, I think that without social media and without the work of Alex blogging about it and raising awareness, local media would never have noticed it, and certainly the New York Times would never have picked up on it. I think it's would not be surprising to know that this is not, while a sort of a terrible thing to have happened, it's not that uncommon situations like this since we found out about Steubenville. I think if you've read the blogosphere at all, there have been a lot of other women coming forward with very similar stories, some dating back decades that never were exposed because no one ever talked about them, because there was not the social mediated world where people thought it was normal to sort of propagate the images that came out of Steubenville. So no, I don't think that without social media, it would have become the national story it became.
And yet, and I'm going to continue the conversation with you because we're trying to get Alex's picture or on her end to work properly. So let me ask you the same question then, or a slightly different question. How is it then in the 21st century that we're still dealing with an attitude that simply says, well, let boys be boys, and, you know, if they get a little out of hand, well, sometimes that happens. Why is that still part of the conversation when I think it's fair to say it should not be?
Yeah, well, I think it's part of this thing that's called rape culture. And I don't know if you're super familiar with it or the audience is, but it's this idea that we have created a sort of culture within our culture where we sort of valorize men based on their sort of virility and their sexual prowess and sort of their sort of hyper-masculine characteristics, while at the same time we continue treating women as though they're sexual objects, talking about them as sexual objects, and where we imagine them as sort of having a very passive role when it comes to sex. And it creates this sort of cultural space where what we understand about sex is that men are aggressive and women are passive. And so yes, you have these conversations where victims get blamed because we have an idea that if you aren't there to be sort of a sexual plaything, then you're not fulfilling some sort of role that has been prescribed for you. And that's sort of the very dumbed down version of rape culture, but it's because we haven't really had these conversations like this, right? We know it exists, but there's not been an open conversation about it. One of my hopes coming out of this Steubenville situation is that we can start having a more open conversation about rape, about consent, and about our ideas of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman and what sex is.
Alex, I can see you, so I think we finally got you back and working. So let me go back and ask you the first question I asked Rosemary, which was, minus social media as we describe it, Twitter, Facebook, etc., would there have been a national conversation about Steubenville, or would it have otherwise been a small-town Eastern Ohio case that we probably never would have heard about? Alex, can you hear me? I can see you. I don't know if you can hear me, though. Well, maybe not. Rosemary, let me go back to you. Alex will keep working on getting you working. What did we learn about social media, Rosemary, as a result of what took place in Steubenville? In other words, was it a success, and if so, in what areas? And was it, or is it possible that in some areas it also was unsuccessful or didn't do the job it perhaps should set out to do?
Well, I think it showed how powerful it can be. I know there's a lot of people who like to talk about social media as though it's not very important. And I think there was a study that just came out, at least about political conversations, about how it tends to be the most vocal and extreme people who get the most traction in Twitter, and not necessarily the most widely held opinions. So I think that idea that social media is a space for sort of crazy people, or to go and spout off about sort of their extreme ideas, or it's a space for, us to talk about what we had for dinner, but nothing of substance. I think that this situation was an example, the Steubenville situation was an example of the power of social media. When people are passionate about something and they use it to sort of create a conversation around an important topic. So I think that the fact that this conversation is happening right now in this Celebrating Communication event, I think the fact that we're still talking about it, that there are blogs that are continuing to talk about the reactions to Steubenville, I think those are all what I would consider successes. Of course, I think that there are probably issues with the fact that these two young men were tried as juveniles, not as adults. And part of the blame, at least from law enforcement, is the fact that so much information was flooded out there that they would have a hard time pulling together a jury pool that would be open and not already biased. So I think the fact that so much information flooded and was unfiltered, that might have been sort of a negative aspect of what happened. But I think the fact, again, we're having this conversation, and hopefully it will spawn more in-depth conversations about rape and rape culture, and sort of, again, about what we're teaching our children. I think those are successes that come out of this situation.
I'm going to try again. Looks like the video feed is popping back in here. It pops in and out on our end. I don't know if you guys are seeing the same thing.
Did you hear what I said?
When we can hear you, even if the picture disappears. So don't worry about that. Alex, any luck with you hearing us at this point? All right, we'll keep going. Rosemary, we'll keep filibustering here a little bit. And make things work. Speaking personally, I think one of the things that disappointed me, and although didn't surprise me, but disappointed me, was in the couple hours after the verdict that there were a couple of other high school students, high school female students, who used this same tool, social media, to threaten the young lady who was raped in Steubenville about 7 or 8 months ago. I'm going to ask a question that's going to sound naive, and I don't mean it to come out that way. Was that inevitable?
Was that what? Inevitable?
Was it inevitable?
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing to remember about social media is while we call them new, the things they expose aren't new phenomena. So the situation with this young girl who was gang raped, I have heard stories and read stories online of that not being as uncommon as we'd like it to be. And so I can imagine if this was an unsocial mediated world, if this is when I was in high school, right, back in the 90s, before the advent of all of this stuff, when cell phones were still these huge monolith, huge things, I could see girls running their mouths and saying nasty things to the girl. That happens. The fact that they felt it was okay for them to say these things on Twitter, in this space where everybody could see it, I think is what's changing the game. And I think it's what we aren't talking to kids enough about, is that, yes, these are behaviors that 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago would have been taking place. But because everyone is sort of not thinking about how visible social media is and how it is exposing all those ugly things, kids aren't thinking about what they're posting. And so it's going to get them in trouble that, if you're gossiping about a girl and making threats to a girl, it's one thing. But, I mean, having a tweet is proof that you have made this threat, right? Otherwise, it's simply hearsay. And so I think it's inevitable that they were going to make these comments. I think the fact that they didn't learn about social media from the situation in Steubenville speaks volumes to the conversations we're not having.
Going to try again to see if Alex can hear us. Any chance you can? All right, we'll figure it out, and we'll figure out what's causing the friction or the technology glitch. So, Rosemary, let me continue with you then with a follow-up question then. It seems as though technology has moved ahead of our ability to understand it, or our ability to fully grasp what we're capable of it being. Will these sort of, I don't know if the word is mistake, but I'll use it. Will these sort of mistakes continue to happen then, where we'll see, pictures that shouldn't be posted get posted? And more importantly, in the interim where we're trying to figure out the code of conduct, what role do all of us who are either teachers in high school or teachers at the college level, what message or lesson do we have to pass on to our students?
Well, I think that, again, this idea that it's visible and that when it's there, it's there. I think Alex is the one who dug up that video, that 12-minute long video that the one young man had made about the rape that happened, right? And so that was a cached video that had been deleted that she found. So I think that we need to have conversations with our students about the fact that when you put it out there, just because you delete it, it doesn't go away, right? If you post terrible things about people, there are ways to resurrect it, right? So once it's there, it's there. It exists forever. And I think that we haven't talked to students enough about that fact, that just because it's gone and you delete it doesn't mean it's gone forever. It's not like you've burnt a piece of paper, right? We can track it. And I think the interesting thing for me is, again, this idea that what the social media is showing is not anything new. Teenagers can be terrible to each other. Minus, we're just, disregarding the rape right now, but the things they say to each other and do to each other are awful. I mean, they're teenagers. I remember being a teenager and I was not the nicest person, right? But I think because technologies have become so lived and so much a part of our lives, and even adults are doing this, where we're not thinking about the ramifications of putting things out there into the internet. And so I think our conversations about the life of these digital technologies and these digital productions, we need to be having those conversations. And I think for me, seeing this so visibly reminds me that we need to be having a more vocal and a louder conversation about sort of the ethics of being a human being and a bit when it comes to rape, what's consent and what's not consent, right? I think that's a huge issue. And then two, just, how to behave with other individuals and how to treat them with respect. Because again, if I'm going to hire you 20 years from now, I can go and dig up your digital archive and find out who you were. And that's, again, never going to go away. So I hope that answered your question, Anthony.
It does. Alex, I'm going to take a chance here, and Rosemary, I may lose you for a second. Your image keeps continuing to have a blue sort of halo around it, and Alex's doesn't. And I'm wondering if for some reason, if I click on her image, I'll be able to talk to her. So give me a second. I may lose you, may not be able to speak to you specifically, but let me see if I can make this work.
Okay.
Alex, any chance you can hear us now? Darn it. Darn it. Not working. Hold on a second. How about now, Alex? Can you hear us? Rosemary, can you still hear us?
I can still hear you.
All right. Well, Alex, I don't know why we're getting glitched on your end, but let me do this. Let me allow some of the students in the room. There are a couple of microphones. Where'd they go? A couple of microphones. For the students who have a question, and again, since the person's not in the room, try to make your question as clear as possible. State your first and last name, the high school you go to, the question you have relating to, again, something about the Steubenville situation, something about social media that you're curious or concerned about, and directed at this point at Rosemary, but again, we're hoping that we can make this a three-person conversation before too long. So who's got the first question in the room? Young lady about 4 rows back or so.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, well, my name is Brandy Boyd, and I attend Carroll Connections Charter High School. And I would like to know your opinion on how and why did they get charged as a juvenile instead of an adult for that rape charge.
I don't know
Okay,
if you heard the question, it was why
yes,
they were charged
why
as a juvenile.
juvenile, not adult, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so I am not a legal scholar. Let's just be clear, I'm a media scholar. But I think part of the problem was, and I've talked with a friend of mine who is an attorney in Ohio, is the fact that there was a worry, at least unofficially, that if they tried to try them as adults, that they would not have been able to find an untainted juror pool, right? Because when you bring in jurors, hypothetically, they're supposed to be have no opinion about the case. And because this Steubenville rape had gotten such attention from the New York Times, from so many different social media outlets across Twitter. There was a fear that they could not get a jury pool that would be unbiased. And even to move venue would have been an issue because, again, this story was all over the place at the time. So I think that the people who, the judge, I believe Judge Lipp is the one who made that decision to try them as juveniles, decided to try them there because I think he thought that was the place where they could have the most fair trial. And the victim would have the most fair space to get justice, because both of these, the defendants and the prosecution, are affected when you can't find an unbiased jury pool. So I think that's a large part of the reason. But again, I'm not a legal scholar. So
Thank you.
Another question over here in the corner, the lady in the white sweater. Microphone's working its way over. Hold on.
Hi, I'm Becky Magnus. I teach at Franklin Regional High School. I'm just wondering, I know a lot of court cases are closed to the media, but why was this court case allowed to be opened with cameras?
Oh, I don't have any idea why that was. I mean, that's a call by the judge. And I think, I mean, you can theorize, right? So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to completely theorize because I have no idea. My guess is because this case was shrouded in so much controversy and there was so much reporting about supposed sort of links between the football coach and the cops and the justice system in Steubenville. I imagine that perhaps he was trying to show transparency in the proceedings based on all of the other sort of rumors that were surrounding this case and the controversy surrounding this case. But again, you know, I'm not a legal person, so every judge has to make that decision based on the trial and sort of on what he or she thinks is best for that situation.
One of the challenges, though, with having an open courtroom is we saw it on Sunday when the young lady's name was broadcast. And I don't know, again, accidental, you know, whatever. It happened, and clearly it shouldn't have happened. Can you discuss the circumstances that caused that? And more importantly, can you talk about why the media were so severely criticized, those that broadcast her name, why they were so criticized for doing so?
Well, I mean, I think there's a general understanding that you don't publish the names of rape victims. There's not a law about that. It's sort of it's a journalism ethical thing, because this person has already been victimized once, and the idea is that by sort of publicizing who they are, you're sort of re-victimizing them. And most news outlets follow a fairly hard line of not publishing or broadcasting rape victims' names. But again, the fact that her first name was, I didn't hear her last name, but I thought I'd heard her first name when they were talking on Sunday, was broadcast, is one of the problems of having video cameras in a courtroom. Whether it was an accident or not, it happened. So I think it sort of raises all kinds of ethical flags. I think it should raise ethical flags for the court to think about, should we be broadcasting this, allowing cameras in courtrooms? And then two, I think raises ethical issues for journalists. Do we need to have cameras in the courtrooms? Is it necessary? Are we re-victimizing people? Are we adding to the drama? I think if you saw some of the reporting coming out of the reactions of the now convicted rapists, those were sort of terrible. Those were sort of heartrending images on one hand, because they're young men who are sobbing in courtroom, but you lose focus of the fact that they've just been convicted of rape, right? So having the cameras in that space raises all kinds of ethical issues. And I'm sure there are going to be journalism newsrooms, right, where they're going to be rethinking, are we going to have cameras in these spaces in the off chance this happens again? Ethics in news, as you know, Anthony, is not sort of a fixed point. It's continually in fluctuation depending on the situation. So I would imagine that there are going to be a lot of conversations about this in newsrooms and about how to handle these situations when they pop up in the future.
Alex, I just got your reply, by the way, with your cell number, so I'm going to call you in a second. But let me have a additional set of questions. Look, there's one question here and one question in the corner as well. In the interim, Alex, I'm going to grab my cell phone and give you a call, so hang tight. Rosemary, the next question will be directed to you.
Okay.
My name is Braden McLean. I'm from Lincoln Park Performing Arts Charter School. But do you see the possibility and potential of social media being as much of a detriment as it is a benefit to society?
Well, absolutely. I think that the Steubenville case is an interesting case, right? Because a lot of what was found, right, were people tweeting about what had happened, and what Alex caught and what she blogged about was what she had found as it was happening, right? But we just had a presentation here at the school of a researcher who has been sort of tracking networks in Twitter and about these people who create fake accounts, especially in association with like political communication, to create sort of astroturf movements, right? So fake grassroots movements. So I think, of course, social media can be a detriment because rumors catch fire and move through social media really quickly. It's really hard to pull back once they've sort of been unleashed. Think about Balloon Boy, which is sort of maybe a trite example, but he was that kid who supposedly had sort of escaped in a hot air balloon, and his parents were all over social media talking about it. People were tweeting it, and all that social media noise made news outlets sort of follow that story, and it ended up being a hoax. So I do think social media can be a detriment. I think it can be very problematic for news outlets, especially because we don't want to lose a story. But at the same time, we have to approach it, I think, very, very skeptically. And I think Alex's approach to Steubenville, if you read about it on her blog, she was trying very hard to match those tweets to people who actually existed in the city, and trying to track down who was who before she went public with any of what she found. So I think she did a really good job of using social media to expose an issue. I think that oftentimes people use social media to sort of propagate something they want to be true or they think is true, or look at all the dead celebrity hoaxes that happen. Again, these are trite examples, but they're the most handy examples, and it's easy to see how you could go from something like Balloon Boy or a dead celebrity to something much larger that could have a larger impact down the road. So I think that I don't think social media is all good or all bad. It's what we make of it, right? And to make it good, we have to be educated consumers. We have to be educated users. We have to have open conversations about the ethics of social media, about its impact on our society and its impact on our news production. As news professionals, we have to think about how it affects what we do and whether those effects are good or bad.
Alex, I've got you on speakerphone, I think. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Great. Yes, we can. I appreciate your patience with all this. This turned out to be, well, you know, technology is a little bit like social media there, Rosemary. If you use it well and it cooperates with you, it works. So let me do this. We can still see your picture up here, so, you know, we can sort of have a conversation that way. Let me backtrack just a little bit to ask you the first question that I asked Rosemary, and folks in the audience, I'm going to get to you in a second, so don't think I've forgotten about you. Minus social media, would this Steubenville rape case have been a national conversation? Why or why not?
Okay. In fact, you're breaking up really bad on the questioning because I have my sound down. Can you get closer to the phone so I can hear it? You're breaking up.
Okay, hang on one second. Let me try repeating it this way. If not, I'll pick up the phone that I have over there. Minus social media, Twitter, Facebook, etc., would this Steubenville rape case have become a national conversation?
No, I don't believe that it would. I think because of the fact of when I wrote about it, people in town were enraged. I upset the ex-boyfriend of the victim and his family, and they sued me for defamation of character. And that's when the New York Times got involved, when the free speech issue came into place. And then, of course, Anonymous. You know, as soon as they became involved. That, I believe, is who really launched this into the national and international spotlight.
Mm-hmm. Why, Rosemary made a good point a few minutes ago, which was, sadly, these kinds of situations happen far too often all across America. So what made this one different? In other words, you mentioned the New York Times story. In other words, the New York Times could have gone to probably every state in the country and found this kind of thing taking place. What was different about Steubenville, if there was something different about the Steubenville situation?
I think the difference with the Steubenville case is, first of all, what was put out on social media was so blatant and disgusting. And once that 12-minute video was posted and people actually had to listen to what was being said, it caused such a visceral response. And once you put in the aspect of football culture and how these high school kids were idolized because of playing on a football team, I think that was just the perfect storm for the nation to wake up and realize that, we had issues on a multi-level platform. You had adults blaming the victim. You had people at the school who still refused to cooperate in the investigation because of who was involved. And then, with all the things that were put out for the world to see, they're upset with me because I reposted them. But, teenagers don't realize who their audience is on the internet. It's not just your circle of friends. The world is watching. Mm-hmm. And that digital footprint stays there forever. The internet doesn't forget.
Questions from the room. I want our students to continue to have a chance. There's a young man over here in the corner. I'll repeat the question should you not be able to hear over the phone there.
Hello, my name is Emmanuel Langus, and I attend Career Connections Charter High School. I was curious how she mentioned that a 12-minute video that they thought they deleted proved to be key evidence. I was wondering, if you delete something, where does it go, and how easy is it to retrieve it?
The question was, again, I don't know if you had a chance to hear it, I'll repeat it just to be safe, and that was this 12-minute video that disappeared but didn't disappear. In other words, how does one go about tracking down something that supposedly has been deleted and therefore in the minds of some people no longer exists?
Okay, it was still really, is there any way you can type the question into the chat to me?
Yeah, let me do that for you. Hold on a second. And
okay, thank you.
I'm going to summarize it briefly, and that is what you're going to see is it's going to say deleted video, how can someone still find something like that? And it's on its way there.
Okay. Click over here.
That's all right. This is like four different kinds of communication all at once.
The deleted video. How can someone find that? Actually, first with the Steubenville video. Anonymous, someone from Steubenville had actually saved that video and turned it over to them. As far as deleting videos on YouTube, when you upload them, when the Google spider goes by, it takes a picture of that thumbnail on your video. So it's still possible to recover that probably a couple days after it's been deleted. But the digital footprint that it was there is going to stay there forever. And so you just use Google, tweets and stuff, archives. You can, Snapbird is one that I use, Popsy.
Rosemary, I saw you nodding your head. You want to chime in real quick on that one?
Well, yeah, I just think it's, there are cached versions of web pages and websites, and usually they stick around for a while, even after they're deleted. So I had a situation where I needed to delete something, and it was, I went through Google to get it deleted, even the cached version, and it was really difficult, and it took weeks to get that done. Because it exists. Because even if you delete it, the web browsers they sort of take pictures, right? And I'm not technologically savvy this way, right? So I'm gonna really dumb it down. But they take pictures of what's there fairly frequently. So there's always a cached version, and that cached version hangs around for a long time too. So you may delete the post immediately, right? But the cached version still exists and may exist, as Alex said, for days in YouTube. On Google, it can exist for months or even years. I found some cached pages that were years old. So it's a matter of just simply digging. I mean, if you're looking for this stuff, if you're interested in looking into stories or looking into issues and finding this stuff, you have to dig. But I mean, if you know what a cached page is and understand that, then you can find a lot of stuff that people are just going to completely overlook.
As we wait for the next question from the audience, Alex, let me direct one to you, and I just sent you the sort of summary version of it. The Ohio Attorney General says that he will continue to look into what happened in Steubenville, including, did anyone withhold evidence, or was there a conspiracy of silence, my words, not anyone else's. Will social media hold the Attorney General in Ohio, sort of hold his feet to the fire and make sure that he follows through with this?
I absolutely believe that social media will play a place. It was realized through text messages that were released during the trial that a lot more people were sharing the photographs and videos that were taken. And, I believe that they will be subpoenaing Twitter accounts, Instagram, YouTube, everything, because it's not just a small community of people watching this anymore. The world is watching, and they're demanding action.
Questions still from the audience? I've got a couple more, but I want to give you guys an opportunity. Maybe 5 rows back or so on this side. Go ahead.
My name is Kayla Brunei, and I also attend Career Connection Charter High School. I was just wondering, what advice would you give to young women or young boys about avoiding a situation like this?
Again, I'm typing this question in for you, Alex, but it was advice for young people to try to avoid situations like this. And the question is on its way.
Advice for young people in a situation like this? As in what happened that night?
Yeah, to avoid such a situation.
Yes. I mean, first of all, we wouldn't even be having this discussion today if one person stood up and said, this is wrong, we have to stop this. We wouldn't be here today talking about this, because the evidence wouldn't have been out there to basically indict themselves. And I guess my advice is, sometimes it's not comfortable to be the lone man standing, but it's necessary to do the right thing. It's not always popular to be the person that, says this is not right and I'm not going along with the group. My mother gave me wise words a long time ago. She said, when sometimes you stand up to do the right thing, you're standing alone.
Mm-hmm. Courage is sometimes a difficult thing, especially in an environment where you're sort of as a pack as teenagers. Other questions in the room? All the way, actually, 3rd row right here. This young lady in the, looks like a gray-colored sweater, if my eyes are being kind to me.
You're right. My name is Jessica Sosha. I go to Robert Morris studying communication. My question is, do you think we'll continue to see this social media presence in legal cases, and is it always positive?
The question is, and Rosemary, I'll give you a chance to answer it first, and as I type it in for Alex, you can ask it, then Alex, give you a chance to answer it second. Go ahead.
I think so. I think that I think there may be people who see what happened in Steubenville and feel like that gives them sort of a justification for being involved in legal cases. And I think in some cases it can be good. I think that part of the reason this case got tried at all was because there was so much exposure, right? This could easily have gone away, and it looked like for a while that it might go away. I don't, as I said earlier, I don't think it's always a good thing. I think that there are instances where false rumors would get out. What happens if a suspect is arrested and someone tweets it and tweets his name, but he ends up not being a person who committed a crime? I can see there's all kinds of ways where people using social media to raise awareness of a case could go very wrong. And it did impact the Steubenville case in good and in bad ways. I think that worries me a little bit, is that people will become sort of vigilantes with information and try cases sort of in the public. I mean, I'm not a lawyer or a judge. I have no idea what the intricacies of sort of that kind of thing is. But I know that I am not in a position to judge anyone guilty or innocent of anything. That's not sort of my position. But yeah, I think that this is going to have an effect down the road, and it'll be good and it'll be bad. I hope it's more good than bad.
Alex, you want to chime in on that one as well?
If you'll ask the question, okay, because I'm trying something else so I can hear you and not have you fight.
Okay. The question I sent you, again, was, do you think we'll continue to see social media involved in court cases, and is that always a good thing?
I do believe we will see social media involved in other cases because, again, sometimes people don't have social off buttons. The amount of information that they put online can be useful for a police investigation. Is it a good thing? Yes, if it's correct information. And like was said, there were some rumors put out there. So I guess it makes it more difficult for law enforcement to have to meet through what is truth and what is fiction. But, this case, again, it's a landmark because for legal precedent, social media heavily influenced how this case turned out because they invited themselves to use social media.
Mm-hmm. I got time for one more question, if there is one. This young lady, maybe fourth row over. Microphone is making its way over. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. The microphone in the room popped out pretty quickly. So Rosemary, I'll ask you the question, and then Alexandria, I'll type it in for you. The question was, in light of the verdicts, there was, and we talked about this briefly, this sort of criticism of some of the media coverage and the petition specifically against CBS, but could be against other networks as well, for either an overt or a hidden bias in their coverage. Was there? I'll take your question and twist it just a little bit, just in the interest of time. Was there a bias in media coverage, and if so, how did we see it, or how did each of you see it? And Rosemary, I'll let you go first, and then again, Alexandria, I'll type the question into you.
I think the idea of bias is hard to talk about, especially when it comes to sexual assault, right? We tend to give way to the victim in cases like this. In the aftermath of the verdict, I don't know if what you saw was a bias in the reporting of CNN or CBS necessarily. I think what you saw was their reaction to two young men who fell apart because they were found guilty of rape, right? And these kids' worlds crashed down around them, but their worlds crashed down around them when they committed the rape. This was just them having that made manifest, right? Mm-hmm. I think when the reporters were reporting on the verdict and what happened, they were responding to that breakdown. I think the problem, I think for me, watching that was pretty hard for me to watch, right? But I think if they had been like, these two kids lost this promising future, but they raped a woman and they were found guilty of that. I feel like saying that statement feels less sort of biased towards the perpetrators than something else. My students in one of my classes raised yesterday this fact that when can the media talk about the fact that these guys did have lives that they have destroyed themselves? I think that is the thing that is missing from some of that conversation, is that these young men destroyed their lives themselves. And maybe that's where that conversation needs to go and should be more geared toward. I'm not sure if I answered that, but.
And Alex, again, I typed the question for you. I summarized it very briefly to say, was there bias in the media coverage?
Initially, when this case was first reported by the local media, yes. And that is one of the reasons that I decided that I would write about it and present the evidence that was out there, because people wanted to know what was going on. With regard to CNN and some of the other media outlets, when I first wrote about this, I said, these kids, the moment they made that decision to violate that girl, the moment their friends didn't stand up to help her, and the moment they put it out on the interweb, they changed their lives forever.
Mm-hmm.
It can never be undone. And so, we've got 2 kids who are sitting in jail right now, others who may be sitting in jail in the future, and we have a young girl whose life has changed forever. So really, there's no winners here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she got justice, but, as a human being, looking at the entire situation as a whole, nobody won.
Mm-hmm. We unfortunately have run out of time on our end. Rosemary, it's great to see you again. Thank you. And Alex, although we didn't get a chance to see you, thank you for hanging in there with us, and we got this to work over the phone. Can we get a round of applause, especially in light? Yes, thank you. Thank you. To both of you again, thank you. This was a hurdle, but we got it to work. Rosemary, I'll see you soon, and Alex, looking forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, guys, now it's the highlight of the day. It's lunchtime, but the learning does not stop. So I want you there outside the hallway here. There'll be boxed lunches. They'll be identified or labeled pretty clearly. Come right back in here because we have a lunchtime program that starts in just a few minutes. So come right back in.